Hi, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video, and I am very excited to have with us today Attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She owns a family law firm out of Worcester, Massachusetts, and it is just always a pleasure to have her on the show. Today, we are going to be talking about methods of collecting child support, and this is a very interesting topic, and I'm sure lots of people are wondering, like, well, what happens if they don't pay the child support? So today, Nicole's going to answer that question. Welcome to the show, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and hopefully you get a lot of education today.
Absolutely, we always do. So let's talk about this. We'll have to start with the basics, where we talk about, well, who determines the child support and how it's paid.
Well, the court and or the parties are going to determine the child support amount. So there's a formula that will obviously be calculated, and most likely you're going to go with whatever that formula is. Certain circumstances, it may be upward or lower than that amount, but that's going to be ultimately decided by the judge. Once it's decided, the question is, how do we apply it? How are we going to get those payments? So there's a couple different ways. The easiest one is going to be by direct deposit. So we'll say that mother is obligated to pay dad child support. In that particular case, mom is going to do a direct deposit into dad's account in the amount that was ordered by the court. Another way is that they're going to give a check. So mom would issue a check to dad every single week to pay the child support. The third option, which is usually the most common, is through the Department of Revenue, otherwise known as DOR.
I see. And so I can imagine that there are going to be certain situations that apply for each of these. So I'm glad that there's the easy way when people are complying and they're paying their child support. But explain to us a little bit more about the DOR.
The DOR is a government agency. You might know them because they're the people that take your taxes at the end of the year. It's the same thing. It's just that they're different agencies. So they're the Child Support Enforcement Unit. And that unit, all it does is collect child support and pay it to the recipient. That is their only job, is they collect, they account, and they disperse. Obviously, there's a lot of things internally that they do, but that's basically what their process is. So they collect it from one parent, issue it to another parent, and that's pretty much how the DOR system works.
Okay, and so we understand that, and you said that there are different services that they offer. What are those services, and how can they help somebody that needs to collect some child support?
So when you fill out the application for DOR, one of the things that is going to be listed on there is, are you going to be collections only, or are you going to be full service? Collections is exactly what I just said. In from one parent, out to another parent. And that's all they do, is basically do the accounting. They're like your bookkeeper, if you will. And then you have full services, which is they will get involved in determining the amount of child support. They will get involved in making sure that the money is actually collected. They will deal with any non-payment issues. So they have a much more wide range of services that they can offer when you do full services, including up to asking for incarceration.
Oh my gosh. You kind of forget that that's the utmost punishment for not paying the child support. Can you talk about what the benefits are of using the DOR?
If you have a parent that isn't good with paying their bills, seems to think that you're not worthy of collecting the child support, even though it's been a court order, will do anything other than pay you because, again, you're the enemy, then that's obviously a good avenue to go, is because DOR is going to have that enforcement ability. They're going to have resources available that you're not going to be able to do. And unfortunately, as a single parent now, you're going to be sitting there going, okay, well, I just really need the money. Can you please give me the money? Can you? And you're begging. And that's really what that other person wants. So that's when you obviously want to go to the agency, so that they're going to be the enforcement. They're going to be the hard people, and they're the ones that are going to make sure that you get the money. So there's definitely a huge benefit to having that when you have a difficult party that's obligated to pay support that just chooses not to. I wanted to state one more advantage for having DOR. If you are the recipient and you're not getting the child support and there's arrears that are being added on, you are also entitled to interest and penalties. So what is going to end up happening is the amount of money is owed to you is going to increase when they don't pay. So that is 5% of that arrears is going to go to DOR for their services. That goes directly to them, and 5% goes to the recipient. So if you're the recipient that's being delayed in getting your payments, you would get that 5% interest on top of the child support amount. So it's definitely something to consider when you're going through DOR. There, again, just another advantage of services that they offer.
And so we've seen that. I mean, obviously, yeah, if you're trying to pay your bills, this is going to be horrible and devastating to your family and what you're able to provide them if you can't collect that money. So it's great that they have a plan in place and a service that can help you with that. Are there any disadvantages to using the DOR?
There's a couple. The biggest one is the delay. So when you initially file an application for DOR, what's going to happen is they process everything. Everything's going to be sent to Boston, then it gets sent to your local branch, which if it's in Worcester County would be the Worcester office. And that processing takes time. Just like any other government agency, they're going to process all the paperwork and submit it. And then once they submit it, then they have to submit it to the employer. So say your husband needs to pay child support to you, then what's going to end up happening is they're going to go to the husband's employer and say, hey, there's a garnishment in the amount of $500 a week. Can you pay this? And then that employer has arguably 2 weeks to get them on the books. And the rule is because it should be the next paycheck. There are employers out there that don't follow the rules. They can be fined for this. But generally, there's that processing period for the employer to do what they need to do. Then now that we've got it in place, we have to wait for a payroll period to end. So you're waiting for all of these steps to happen. So long story short, you could be waiting 4 to 6 weeks before your first check. Now that being said, it's probably going to be a very hefty check because you're going to get paid for all those weeks that you've been waiting, because he's obviously obligated to pay during that period of time. It's just that you're going to get it all in one lump sum. Not everybody can wait those 6 weeks to get that entire process to happen. So that's usually the biggest downfall. The other thing is that, at some point when the children are older, it may be harder to get them to determine when emancipation is. So a lot of times if somebody is emancipated on their 21st birthday and one parent is going, no, it's the 23rd birthday, you may have a lapse there as well, or you may have some miscommunication that you'll have to articulate with DOR to get it either continued or stopped, depending on where you are.
Wow, it sounds like there is some waiting. I mean, hopefully for those people that have to wait, that they can handle it. But, I'm sure that in many cases, they've already been waiting for several months before they went and took the action of hiring the DOR to help out. I mean, do you see that a lot?
I do, and unfortunately, it usually relies on their family members, so their parents, a sibling or something, to kind of front that money until such time child support comes in. Unfortunately, if somebody has a court order that says it's through Department of Revenue, you can't take the money. So you have to have it go through DOR, or that's going to be a whole bunch of accounting issues later on in the run, at the end of it. So basically what you want to do is, even when that period is stopping, you want to, as a recipient, you want to make sure that the payor is paying that money to DOR and it's just sitting there, unfortunately, for you to collect eventually.
So how does the DOR enforce these orders? Is there certain steps that they take, and do the penalties and the actions get tougher and tougher on the person not paying?
Absolutely. So obviously, like I said, in the beginning, it's going to be sent to the employer. The employer has an obligation to do it within a certain time frame. If the employer doesn't, and sometimes it's because, hey, he's my buddy and he's doing me a favor, or I'm off the books, or some magical things like that, again, DOR can come after both the employer as well as the responsible party. So that is one option. Assuming that is taking place, then obviously it's going to come out of your paycheck. Each and every paycheck, whatever the amount is going to come out. Obviously, if you get paid biweekly, then it's going to come out twice as much, so that we can make for that allocation. If you don't pay it and you start acquiring arrears, then there are different penalties that they can take, such as they can garnish your wages up to 25% of your entire wages, which really goes up to about 50% of your gross. So that's a huge amount of money that they can take just to get those arrears off the book. Another thing that they can do is they can put liens on any real estate. So if you own real estate, they can put a lien on it, which would prevent you from either selling it or, doing anything with that property, conveying it to a third party. They can seize assets. They're really good at seizing assets. And assets is everything. It could be a vehicle. It could be a bank account. It could be lottery winnings. It could be retirement accounts. So these are all assets that they have abilities to go in and collect. One of my favorites is they're going to intercept your tax returns. That's a no-brainer. No matter what, if you owe money at the end of the year and you file taxes, they will intercept it. You will not get whatever refund you are entitled to. And the problem with the intercept is that it basically sits in limbo for 6 months. So mom doesn't get it, dad doesn't get it, nobody gets it. And eventually they will, but it's one of those things that it's just there, and they have to have a process, an appeal process, and things of that nature. But those are the things that ultimately they can get, and usually tax refund checks are a huge amount of money that usually wipe out the arrears. So that's a great thing for the recipient, not so good for the payer. They can intercept any kind of judgments or insurance claims. So if you get a judgment award from me and I owe money, then guess what? They can collect on that. If you have insurance proceeds, you were in a car accident and you're getting insurance proceeds, one of the things is they have to, when we're issuing that insurance check, is they have to determine whether or not any money is owed. So again, they're going to be able to intercept it before you even get the lump sum. So you get an insurance proceeds or a judgment for $10,000, you're like, yes, I'm getting that money. Oh, wait, $2,000 is owed in child support. That's coming right off the top. Your amount is now $8,000, and that's what they're going to do. Any kind of workman's comp or unemployment claim. So all of those things are things that they can levy, and they can get the money. Another thing that they can do is obviously put it on your credit report. At some point, you're going to be delinquent. Now, that's one that they don't do that often, but if they do, that's going to hurt you. Obviously, the last and final one is kind of the big one. They will put you in jail. Obviously, they're not going to do that for smaller amounts. But there are people out there that owe $10,000 up to $100,000. They can file both criminal charges or they can file civil charges against you for your non-payment. So it's a huge risk that you're taking by not paying child support. If you're one of those people that just says, I want to work off the books because I don't want to pay, because again, that person's very greedy and they're not entitled, it's going to come back to hurt you. So think about it, because there could be huge ramifications. And obviously when you're facing that, I would hope that you would get an attorney that's going to protect you as best as they can. Just another ways that they can do it is suspend your license or, suspend your passport.
It's really interesting you say that, because I remember a while ago, a few years ago, I got a call from an old boss that I hadn't seen in, 5 or 6 years at that time. And I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? He's like, oh, I'm not doing that great. I'm like, oh no, why? He's like, oh, I'm sitting in jail right now. And I'm like, what? So it was really surprising. But, then he told me that it was because he owed child support. He had lost his job, and I guess they had finally thrown him in jail. So I did not give him any money, but I could just imagine that he was just sitting in jail going through his phone, trying to call anyone and everyone that he could possibly think of.
And that's what happens. Generally speaking, if the judge does that, they'll give you what is called a purge amount. So if you owe $10,000, the purge amount may be $5,000. So if you want to get out of jail earlier, you come up with $5,000, which means you sit there and you call all of your friends and all of your family to come up with that money. If you don't, then you're going to do the amount of time that the judge has awarded, which could be 10 days, could be 30 days, could be even more, depending on the circumstances.
So, so that's very interesting. So can you tell me, like, what if I'm using the DOR and I decide that it really isn't working for me? Like, what can I quit, or is it like once you start, you're in and there's no getting out of it?
It depends on who you are. So if you are the recipient of child support, then yes, you can quit. If you're the payor, then no. So the recipient is the one in charge of how the money is going to be allocated and how it's going to be paid to them. So if you are the recipient of the child support, you're the one receiving it, and you say, this isn't working, my ex is really good with money and I can't continue to wait, and he keeps switching jobs, and now there's a delay each time he switches jobs. It doesn't make sense for me. It just makes sense if he pays me. You can always do that. So you can go to DOR and say, I want my services terminated. As long as they have it in writing, then they will terminate those services.
Absolutely. So if I didn't use the DOR to begin with, can I start using it in the middle? If I'm having trouble collecting the child support for my ex and I had no idea that was going to happen.
Same rules apply. So again, if you're the recipient, you can certainly change services and ask for DOR. The problem is it's not going to be retroactive. So the day that you fill out the application, say it's 6 months after the judgment is entered, you're going to give DOR the copy of the judgment and you're going to give them a copy of the application. It's going to start once they process that application. It's not going to start that 6 months prior, because they don't know what happened. They don't know whether or not payments were made or not made. So if you want to get any kind of retroactive support, you would have to file a contempt or get some kind of agreement with your ex that says he owes you $5,000 or whatever the magic number is. So it's going to start from that point forward, just so you're aware. So it's something to be aware of, that yes, you can start it at any point in time, but it's not going to be retroactive. And obviously you're not going to have any arrears as of the date that you submit the application.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of things with divorce. You've got to file that paperwork, or else you don't get to recover what somebody owes you from before in a few different situations. So, well, this is very interesting. Are there any other stories or bits of information that you'd like to tell us about this topic today before we go?
I think one of the things came up is what you said, is that the gentleman was out of work and was sitting in jail. If your circumstances have changed from when that child support order was in place, you should be consulting with an attorney to find out what your rights are. Because guess what? That number doesn't magically change because you're unemployed. The child support number doesn't change if you're out on disability. It doesn't change if you're receiving Social Security income now and you weren't before. It doesn't change if you're incarcerated. So if anything happens where you're no longer receiving the same amount of income every week, you need to take proactive steps so that you can reduce the child support number to a number that is fair and reasonable based on the guidelines. And it doesn't happen by osmosis. You actually have to talk to somebody and you have to file the paperwork in court in order to get that reduction.
That's very good advice. And And you're right. I mean, he should have been telling an attorney the minute he lost his job so that he didn't end up in that situation. So many people are uneducated on this. You know, sometimes it's your first divorce and you don't know what you don't know. And that's why you hire a professional. And, you know, this is the point when I like to say, you know, if you have any questions about, you know, child support or any family law matters at all, absolutely give Nicole's office a call, because her and her whole staff are so helpful and straightforward. And if you don't need an attorney, they're going to tell you that. But for certain situations, you don't want to be doing it on your own. It could cost you tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars later in, you know, in something that you might have missed because you don't go to court every day like they do. You didn't go to school for it. You've got all these documents that are super thick, and if it's just not your expertise. Hey, I know divorce attorneys that hire divorce attorneys for their divorces. Say that 5 times fast. And they do that because it takes the emotion out of it for them. And they let somebody else that's cool-headed handle it. But also, I mean, for people that aren't attorneys, the education alone is going to be incredibly beneficial. And you know, a lot of these decisions will last a lifetime. So do it right the first time. So thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate your coming on and explaining this today. And we are looking forward to next week's topic.
Thank you for having me.